a word. How could you possibly, and I've approached this every way under the sun, how could you possibly, not even just in today's time of disintegrating economy, how could you hear of a proposition of mathematically perfected economy and not at least read at least just a few sentences, and if the quality of what those first few sentences alone taught was enough to convince any intelligent person that by God there is a solution to these things, and so I try and score right out the gate with this stuff. How could any of these people, I mean, I have still sealed documents, that I've sent to people and have been returned to me, President Obama, unopened, requested by his campaign, returned unopened, requested by his campaign and returned unopened. I frankly find that unbelievable.
Yeah, I see that as the right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing. Somebody wanted to maybe see that, and somebody who knew what it really was said,
here's
and
what's
sent
really
it
going
back.
on in every instance of that. And I mean, I've been bought dinners, $500 a plate dinners, so that I could personally provide a written 20-page proposition, a mathematically perfected economy, to candidate Jerry Brown, by one of his best friends, Montana Padva, What usually goes on in a campaign, and my dropping in on the Brown campaign office was really truly a spectacularly memorable event in my lifetime, because I no sooner walked in the door, stopped at the reception desk, spoke a few sentences, and top campaign people who were whizzing by all put on the brakes and stopped right there from the first few sentences they heard. And this escalated into an actual, impromptu presentation on mathematically perfected economy to 300 delegates assembled from all over the country who were flying in at the very moment that I walked in the door, into the wee hours of the morning, and no one left, The thing is, you can call the campaign office of Barack Obama, and you can talk to a good citizen, a diligent, caring person, and without wasting their time, you can gain their ear in 3 sentences. You can demonstrate your credibility, and they will listen to you. And as the lights go on in their own minds and hearts, they realize that, by God, this is the guy that has the proposition that the president has to hear, so that he can be the great president that I know he's going to be. And they believe, and I mean, this happens regularly, that someone in a campaign understands the gravity of this proposition, And it's a very, very strange thing how it dies at the candidate. But I have seen it with my own eyes. I wouldn't endeavor to describe the handshake that I got from Jerry Brown when I was introduced to him by Montana Padva immediately after his speech to this huge dinner in San Francisco, and provided the opportunity to present a manila envelope full of papers, which were a proposition of mathematically perfected economy. He literally turned white as a ghost before my very eyes, couldn't utter a word out of his mouth. He had the oddest expression on his face. And I really truly can't think that the person was just so corrupt that their mind immediately raced about for some way to avoid me, but I was right there and I had a hold of their hand and they were in deep trouble, you know. I mean, Montana asked me to give him a brief explanation of it, and I uttered about 4 or 5 sentences which were thoroughly convincing to any intelligent person, you know. Start out, you know, quoting Jefferson and explaining what it means in terms that they've never heard before, you know. And yet it died right there, and I saw it in front of my very face. I got the limpest, coldest handshake of a corpse I've ever got in my life. And this guy drew a blank. There was just something terribly, terribly, terribly wrong with him. I mean, terribly. I mean, to be running for president and be introduced to a proposition of mathematically perfected economy, to shake the hand of the person as he utters 4 or 5 sentences at the behest of one of your dearest friends, and to just go into shock, your jaw drops, you can't utter a word in return. Something is really wrong there. And I don't, you know, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to put my finger on just what it was. But, you know, I think it's probably simpler than we want to believe. Number one, the guy isn't really about what he's parading himself to be about. Number two, he's not really the intellectual he's learned to pretend to be. Number three, he doesn't have the wherewithal to campaign for something so personally dangerous to himself. And the rest extends from just those few things, you know. But no matter how you stack it up, you know, we could meet in Washington, D.C., we could succeed in getting a meeting with Barack Obama tomorrow morning at 10:13 a.m. We could be on time. We could be dressed right. We could walk in the door. We could have a pleasant introduction. We could sit down and we could begin to present this. And we couldn't imagine that there was such a wall between us, that what was spoken from our side could not breach that wall to get to the other side. Whatever it was, that person was so predisposed or pre-committed to a different course by all the things that he'd already pledged, and therefore wouldn't have the slightest inclination to think that he could possibly let someone down by advocating mathematically perfected economy or even diligently hearing our appeal. I mean, it's odd like that, because these people are already wrong, because they're already heading the wrong direction, because they're people of false commitments, and because the little respect and support they have from those who they do interact with is because they haven't burned any more bridges than they already have, and this is likely to ruffle feathers or excite people or cause people not to achieve other goals that they're intending, and I'll be in the middle of that. Get this person out of my office. I'm not representative government. I'm about another thing altogether, which is cronyism, whatever, you know. My largest contributor was the financial system, the Bank of New York, you know, and here I am, and you're telling me we've got to get those guys out of the picture? Bye-bye, you know. So
Yeah, not going to happen. Not anytime soon.
Well, not that way. It won't.
No.
Not that way. It won't. But they're talking about fiscal austerity now. That's the biggest lie that there is. Why is this a debt to this banking system? Start right there where the foundations of the money. And I mean, there isn't a good answer. Some of these people think they can answer the question, like Ellen Hodgson Brown would probably shoot something right out there. And if we could contain our laughter, we might smite her for it. But the thing is, these people are unfit to govern, and they are bound to do even worse things. I mean, this is a thing I saw begin first in England. Several months ago, where they started talking about fiscal austerity. Well, I'm sorry, do the math, but you can't work your way out of this. It won't work. And the other thing is, all this debt was multiplied out of other debt because of federal overspending, failing to meet it in the first place. And the debt exists, supposedly, to mere publishers of our promissory obligations to each other, who merely launder the principal into their possession. And so, how is this actually a debt to them? If I write on a piece of paper that you owe me a debt, so that because you're such a fool that you think that's the only thing that you can spend, do I actually owe you so much as that piece of paper ostensibly represents? Absolutely, goddamn not. And so when we insist on ceasing payment of taxes, when we formally renounce this government, this mandate even requires the military to go in and arrest the bastards. And to immediately hold a real election afterward.
Yeah, I think what needs to be done. I think Iceland had probably the best idea by basically saying "screw you," and now they're at the point of throwing out the government and probably bringing in a government of the people, literally.
The problem with that, and I've had extensive discussions with a number of people over there. The problem is, except for one person, who's quite a young fellow and a remarkable young fellow over there. His name is Thorarin Einarsson. Except for Thorarin, the people that I've had discussions with, and they have major roles, prominent major roles. They are not, so far, at least as they've proven so far, they don't have the Constitution, in truth, to deal with these issues. And so my faith has waned for Iceland. There are other developments around the world. There are various reasons that they haven't achieved more immediate success. But in every case that I see, this mandate is the solution. In Iceland, for instance, the people, I follow what's going on at times. I'll poke my nose deeply into it, and I see the people appealing for what actually has to be done. And what's happening with these people who are in prominent roles of the new leadership. If